Hey guys, sorry I'm a little late. I'm here. Let's hope somebody else comes in and makes this all worth the while. Started less than a minute ago. We'll see what happens. Well, there's one person watching. That's probably myself. All right, I'm going to give it a few minutes, see what happens. See if anybody's actually interested. Well, I hope to God somebody shows up, otherwise I'll feel real stupid. Who do we got? There's 4 people. All right. Hey Jim, how's it going? I was just trying out my new 20-meter ham sticks, tried them as a dipole. No joy, but it is what it is. How's your day going, Jim? Well. Anybody else want to say hi? Let me know you're here. Oh, I hate when that happens. What antenna did you get, or are you having delivered? That's creepy watching myself in replay. Anywho, I was hoping 20 was going to be open today, but either it's not or I've got a crap dipole. Either way, it was fun while I was playing with it. Well. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this for a minute. There we go. And then, just for grin, if anybody wants to come on up, come on up. Yeah, I should probably try the vertical, but I got to get a 90-degree right angle adapter for my PL259, so the feed line doesn't touch the antenna as it's working. Otherwise, the world will implode, or so I've been told. All right, well, I'm going to continue on. All right, we're going to talk about feed lines and connectors. Feed lines connect radios to antennas. There are many different types of feed lines, including coaxial cable, ladder line, twin lead, and open wire feed line. But coaxial is the most common type. Why is coax cable the most common feed line selected for amateur radio antenna systems? They're easy to use and require no special. Perhaps the most important consideration when choosing a feed line is to match the impedance of the feed line to the output impedance of the transmitter and the input impedance of the antenna. 1 second. Working on these here too. Got the bow fangs, the extended antenna, speaker mic, and extra battery. Nice. Nice. I'm actually working on a APRS Go box with one of my bow fangs and a 9 amp hour 12 volt sealed lead acid battery. What is impedance? The measure of the opposition to AC current flow in a circuit. What is the unit of impedance? That's the ohm. Most amateur radio transmitters have output impedance of 50 ohms, and most antennas have an input impedance close to 50 ohms. Because this is the case, most coaxial cable used in amateur radio stations has an impedance of 50 ohms. What's the impedance of most coaxial cables used in amateur radio? I just said it, 50 ohms. RG58 and RG8 are two types of coaxial cable used in amateur radio stations. Both have an impedance of 50 ohms. I like using RG58. It's a little stiffer, I grant that, but I don't know, it just works better with me. Coaxial cable does, however, have some disadvantages. One of them is that it may be lossy at high frequencies. In general, what happens as the frequency of the signal passing through a coaxial cable is increased, the loss increases. What is the electrical difference between RG58 and RG8 coaxial cable? RG8 has less loss at a given frequency. In general, the smaller the diameter coaxial cable, the higher the losses will be at higher frequencies. And the longer the feed line, the higher the losses. So for example, using an RG58 coax as the feed line for an 80-meter dipole might be just fine, but you don't want to use 50 feet of RG58 to connect your 440 megahertz FM transmission to an antenna on the roof or a tower, because loss. Even RG8 cable is not really the best choice to use at FM VHF and UHF frequencies. Most repeaters, for example, use air-insulated hardline coaxial cable for their feed line. Which of the following types of feed line has the lowest loss at VHF and UHF? Air-insulated hard line. Another disadvantage of coax is that it is more sensitive to moisture than other types of feed lines. Hey, Lady Casca, I see you there. Yeah, welcome to the madhouse. And really, I just started. You haven't missed too much. Which is the most common cause of failure for coax and failure of coaxial cables? Moisture contamination. See, the problem is the moisture will get into the line, and then outside, inside there's the braided wire, then there's an insulator, and then there's copper wire in the very middle. Moisture gets in there and it will play Mary Hob with all your equipment. It's not good. One way that moisture enters the cable is reveal cracks in the cable's outer jacket. Just explain that. Why should the outer jacket of coaxial cable be resistant to ultraviolet light? This is a good question, yeah. Ultraviolet light can damage the jacket and allow water to enter the cable. And we don't want water into the cable because water gets in, your radio is toast. Simple as that. What is the disadvantage of air core coaxial cable when compared to foam or solid dielectric types? It requires special techniques to prevent water absorption. PL259 connectors are the most common type of connectors used on coaxial cables in amateur radio stations. Which of the following is true of the PL259 type coax connector? They're commonly used at HF frequencies. Sorry for the noise. My window's open and I live on a highway. Cool. One problem PL259 connectors is that they are not the most suitable connector when operating on higher frequencies. Type N connectors are much better choice for UHF frequencies. Which of the following connectors is most suitable for frequencies above 400 megahertz? That would be the type M. It just said that right up at the top there. Another problem with PL259 connectors is they are not waterproof. If installed indoors, water can get into the cable if it's not sealed in some way. This can lead to increased loss and eventual failure. Why should coax connectors exposed to the weather be sealed against water intrusion? To prevent an increase in feed line loss. I know that makes a whole lot of sense. And actually it does, because if you get water in your antenna line, you're pretty screwed. It is not a happy day. Coax cable connectors can be a real pain to install properly and are a frequent cause of failure. Yeah, I agree. Goodwill is great. When installing a feed line, make sure that your coax connectors are soldered properly and that they make solid connections with one another. What causes erratic changes in SWR readings? That's standing wave ratio. A loose connection in an antenna or a feed line. You always want to check to make sure your antennas are connected properly. Otherwise, all you're going to get is noise, which is ridiculous. Moving on. Hey, standing wave ratio and antenna measurements. Standing wave ratio, or SWR, is a term you'll often hear when talking about antenna feed lines. It is a measure of how well matched a feed line is to an antenna. When we say that an antenna is matched to a transmission line, we mean that the impedance of the transmission line is equal to the impedance of the antenna. 50 ohms on the feed line, 50 ohms on the antenna, you're good to go. In general terms, is standing wave ratio, SWR, a measure of how well a load is matched to a transmission line. In this context, the load, quote unquote, is the antenna. The higher the SWR, the greater mismatch between the antenna and transmission line, and you get a lot of noise. What reading on an SWR meter indicates perfect impedance match between the antenna and the feed line? That is 1-to-1, and that's what everybody shoots for. What does an SWR reading of 4-to-1 indicate? That it's not matched. It's an impedance mismatch. When the feed line impedance matches the antenna input impedance, the SWR will be low. The reason this is a good thing is that when the feed line impedance matches the antenna input impedance, the most power is transferred to the antenna and then radiated. Why is it important to have a low SWR when using coaxial cable feed line? To reduce signal loss. The bigger mismatch is between the feed line and the load. The higher the SWR will be. The higher the SWR, the more power you will lose in the feed line. What happens to power lost in a feed line? It is converted to heat, which can cause anyone? Bueller? You can cause a fire. Power converted into heat is not radiated by the antenna, meaning your radiated signal will be loose, will be weaker. Not loose. I don't know where the hell that came from. You can measure the SWR of your antenna system with an SWR meter. Usually connect the SWR meter between the transmitter and the antenna near the input of your transmitter, because it is important to have a low SWR at that point. So you want it as close to your transmitter or transceiver as you possibly can get. What's the proper location for an external SWR meter? It's in series with the feed line between the transmitter and the antenna. That's really important to remember. It has to be in series. You don't want it, out of series, because that could be bad. Most amateur radio transceivers today will reduce output power should the SWR of an antenna system get too high. The reason for this is to protect the radio from being damaged by reflected power. Yeah, power coming back is not good. That's why, you want to have, if you have a vertical antenna up on your roof, you want to have a lightning arrestor as well, or a ground wire that would have to go 8 feet into the ground to dissipate. Question: why would most solid-state amateur radio transmitters reduce the output power as SWR increases? And that is to protect the output amplifier transistors. An SWR meter is not the only way to measure SWR. What instrument other than an SWR meter could you use to determine if a feed line and antenna are properly matched? That would be a directional watt meter. When using a directional watt meter, you first measure the forward power and then the reflected power. And using those two values, you calculate the SWR. Another test instrument that you can use to measure SWR of an antenna is the antenna analyzer. Which of the following instruments could be used to determine if an antenna is resonant at the desired operating frequency? That would be your antenna analyzer. Some antenna analyzers will also let you measure the capacitive reactance and inductive reactance, and also be used as an RF signal generator. These capabilities may be useful in applications other than antenna analysis. Wow, did I butcher that one? It's antenna analysis. I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Talking is thirsty work. If an antenna's impedance is not 50 ohms, the impedance of the transmitter end of the feed line will not be 50 ohms. Don't worry though, you can use a device called an antenna tuner or antenna coupler to transform the impedance from whatever it happens to be to 50 ohms. We call this process impedance matching. What is the major function of an antenna tuner or antenna coupler? It matches your antenna system impedance with the transceiver's output impedance. You want them to match, otherwise you're not going to get a signal out and there could be damage to your equipment. In addition to instruments that make antenna measurements, it's helpful to have an instrument that can simulate an antenna. The purpose of a dummy load. Basically, a dummy load is just a big 50 ohm resistor that provides a known impedance to the transmitter, converts the transmitter output power into heat so that it does not get radiated. If the transmitter operates normally when a dummy load is connected to it, you can reasonably sure that the transmitter is good. What is the purpose of a dummy load? To prevent transmitting signals over the air when making tests. What does a dummy load consist of? Non-inductive resistor and a heat sink. That's it. Moving on. Amateur radio signals. Modulation modes and signal bandwidth. Modulation is the process of adding information to a radio wave. For example, to send a voice signal, you modulate the radio wave with your voice. Seems pretty simple right there. There are several different types of modulation, but when you get your technician's license, chances are that frequency modulation, or FM, is the type of modulation you'll use first. When you frequency modulate a radio, the audio actually changes the frequency of the radio wave a little in proportion to the volume of the audio signal. An FM receiver detects its frequency change and recreates the audio. That's why you can hear music on the radio. Which type of modulation is commonly used for VHF and UHF voice repeaters? That would be FM. What type of modulation is most commonly used for VHF packet radio transmission? Again, FM. Amplitude modulation, amplitude, or AM, is another type of modulation. To amplitude modulate a signal, you vary the amplitude of the signal in proportion with the audio level. Single sideband, or SSB, is a form of amplitude modulation. Which of the following is a form of amplitude modulation? Single sideband, literally just said it. Which type of voice mode is often used for long distance, weak signal contacts on VHF and UHF bands? Again, single sideband. Where may single sideband phone be used in amateur bands above 50 megahertz? In at least some portion of these bands. Hey, good luck! I hope you get it. I may go extra, I'm not sure yet. I kind of like being in general. Which sideband is normally used for 10 meter HF, VHF, and UHF single sideband communications? That's your upper sideband. The audio of an FM signal sounds better than an AM signal, but it occupies a wider bandwidth than an AM signal or a single sideband signal. This means you can have fewer FM signals in any given frequency range than SSB signals. What is an advantage of single sideband SSB over FM for voice transmission? SSB signals have narrower bandwidth. What is the appropriate bandwidth of a single sideband voice signal? That's 3 kilohertz. What's the appropriate bandwidth of a VHF repeater FM phone signal? And phone in this case means voice. That is between 10 and 15 kilohertz. Some modes have very wide bandwidth, such as analog fast scan TV. What is the typical bandwidth of analog fast scan TV transmission in the 70 centimeter band? That is about 6 megahertz. What type of transmission is indicated by the term NTSC? An analog fast scan color TV signal. NTSC stands for National Television Standards Committee. Morse code, or CW signals, have a narrower bandwidth than either AM or FM. Which of the following types of emissions has the narrowest bandwidth? That's CW. That stands for continuous wave. It also indicates Morse code, which is no longer necessary to get your ham license. What is the approximate maximum bandwidth required to transmit a CW signal? Oh, great. Go enjoy the 75 degrees. Have a good one. Thanks for stopping in. What is the appropriate maximum bandwidth required to transmit a CW signal? That is 150 hertz. Technicians have CW privileges on 80, 40, 15, and 10 meters, as well as all VHF and UHF and microwave fans. Yes, there's a microwave fan in case you didn't know. What code is used when sending CW on amateur bands? That's International Morse code. What is an electronic keyer? A device that assists in manual sending of Morse code. Moving on. Man, there's a lot of blank pages. There we go. Digital modes, packet PSK31. When hams talk about digital modes, we're talking about modes that send digital data rather than voice or other types of analog signals such as television. Usually, we connect our transceivers to a computer to modulate and demodulate the digital signals. But some transceivers do this internally. Which of the following is a digital communications mode? Answer: all of these are correct. You've got packet radio, you've got IEEE 802.11 and JT65. There's stability, or whatever it is. And then there's JS8 call has been a big one as of late. And I might get into that if I can get my computer connected to my radio. Packet radio was one of the first digital modes. It's called packet radio because the data to be sent from station to station are separated into a number of packets, which are then sent separately by the transmitting station and received and reassembled by the receiving station. Think of it like a transporter in Star Trek, I guess. Which of the following may be included in packet transmissions? All of these choices are correct. A checksum which permits error detection, a header that contains the call sign of the station to which the information is being sent, automatic repeat request in case of an error. All of those answers are correct. Some amateur radio, audio, digital communication systems use protocol which ensure error-free communications. One such system is called the Automatic Repeat Request, or ARQ, transmission system. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm still trying to learn Morse on my old straight T. Hopefully I'll get it someday. Question, what is an ARQ transmission system? It is a digital scheme whereby the receiving station detects errors and sends a request for the sending station to retransmit the information. APRS, yay, I love APRS, it's great. APRS is one service that uses packet radio. The major applications of APRS is to send location reports while operating a mobile amateur radio station. What does the term APRS mean? It's Automatic Packet Reporting System. Which of the following is an application of APRS? Providing real-time tactical digital communication in conjunction with a map showing the location of stations. And if you go to aprs.fi, that's Foxtrot India, you can see a map, you can look up call signs in your area or wherever, and you can see if they have been moved or not, or if they just decided to, I'm going to send out a beacon. Here I am. In fact, I can do that right now on mine. Have to go in here and go to APRS Droid, because that's what I'm running. All right. This is what it looks like. Okay. And at the bottom, I hit send position. Single shot. And it comes up with basic information on where you're at. This says 14439 megahertz. That's for technically APRS. That's the FM frequency for it. But yeah, it's pretty fun. I like to do that all the time. Especially if I'm driving somewhere I've never been. I like to monitor my route, and then when I get home, I can look up on the map the way I want. It's actually pretty cool. Which of the following devices is used to provide data to the transmitter when sending automatic position reports from a mobile radio station? That would be a global positioning system receiver. A popular digital mode on HF bands is PSK31. PSK31 signals are modulated by shifting of the phase of the tone being sent. What does the abbreviation of PSK mean? Phase shift keying. The 31 in PSK31 comes from the fact that data is transmitted and received at about 31 baud, and that the bandwidth of the PSK31 signal is only about 31 hertz. Unfortunately, that's how fast most people can type. I'm a little slower than that. Digital Mobile Radio, or DMR, is an FM signal communication system that's become quite popular in amateur radio. It allows the amateur radio operators to use the spectrum more efficiently by multiplexing two signals in a single 12.5 kilohertz repeater channel. It also allows amateur radios to connect with one another over the internet. Yes, that's a thing. Which of the following best describes DMR? A technique for time multiplexing two digital voice signals on a single 12.5 kilohertz repeater channel. And again, all of these questions are actually on the test. So take your time, go back over these. I'll put the description in, or I'll put the link into this description as well as the others. One of the interesting things about operating DMR is the ability to join a talk group. The talk group is a virtual channel that connects radio users locally over a repeater or statewide, nationally, or internationally over the internet. What is a talk group on a DMR digital repeater? A way for groups of users to share a channel at different times without being heard by other users on the channel. How can you join a digital repeater's talk group? Program your radio with the group's ID or code. I don't have DMR radios, so I really have no idea how they work. I hear a lot of good things, but I don't know. WSJT software is software that provides weak signal digital communication modes on amateur radio frequencies. To communicate with one of the digital modes that WSJT software provides, you need a single sideband transceiver, a personal computer, and a sound card. All right. Which of the following operating activities is supported by digital mode software in the WSJT suite? All of these are correct. Moon bounce or Earth, moon, Earth. Weak signal propagation beacon, meteor scatter. FT8 is one of the modes supported by WSJT. What is FT8? A digital mode that is capable of operating low signal to noise conditions that transmit on 15-second intervals. Mesh networking is another amateur radio activity that's becoming popular. Mesh networks use Wi-Fi frequencies that just happen to be part of the 2.4 gigahertz, 3.4 gigahertz, and 5.8 gigahertz amateur bands. Mesh networks allow amateur radio stations to establish digital communication links for supporting high-speed emergency communications and internet connectivity. Broadband Hamnet and Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network, that's ARDN, are two projects that use mesh networking to provide digital communications. Interestingly enough, I have two mesh nodes that I created using the broadband Hamnet. I took old Linksys routers. Yes, FT8 is popular. I took two old Linksys routers. I went to hamnet.net and they give you a program to flash onto the router, making it no longer a router, but in fact a node for mesh networking. And it's pretty cool. I actually have two. I'm going to set them up when I get a bigger place and when it seems more likely that I'll have room. Okay, question. Which of the following best describes broadband Hamnet, also referred to as high-speed multimedia network? An amateur radio-based data network using commercial Wi-Fi gear with modified firmware. And it's really not that hard to do. I've done it, and I know jack about anything. I'm going to call it good right about here. Save electrical safety 4. I'm hoping, barring any emergencies, Thursday evening. So I'm going to cut this, but I'm not cutting the live. Now's the time we can sit around and just BS if we want. Many of you guys on 10 meters are using it right now because this thing's very good and noisy. Yeah, that's what I hear. Now, see if anybody wants to come up again. Oink. So, I hope everybody's doing all right. Or they're so good. All right, well, Jim, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to cut. I've got a splitting headache. You have a great day. 7-3.